Welcome to Sam's Business Growth Show. I'm Sam Dunning, a digital marketing, sales and business growth evangelist. Tune in and subscribe today as I'll be interviewing business leaders, experts and entrepreneurs from around the globe. You'll be learning their story, how digital marketing has helped them along the way, and exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your own business. And welcome back to Sam's Business Growth Show. Excited today to be joined by Jason Cutter. Jason is the CEO at Cutter Consulting Group, where he helps create scalable training programs for new sales reps. He improves the selling processes to increase sales 20 to 30%. He turns average sales reps into sales closing machines, and he optimizes the lead generation process to create a profitable cost per acquisition. He's host of the Sales Experience podcast, and he's author of the soon-to-be released Selling with Authentic Persuasion. Jason, a warm welcome, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Sam. How are you?
All good, my friend. Looking forward to a good conversation today with yourself.
It should be fun.
Yeah, man. So as always, there's a few key things we want to learn from you, Jason. We'd love to learn your top business growth tips. We'd love to learn your top marketing strategies. So be it digital marketing or be it offline marketing, things like cold email, cold callers, etc. But before we get to that good stuff, we want to know a bit more about yourself. So a bit more about your background. So where you grew up, some of the key places that you've worked at, and some of the lessons that you learned at some of the businesses up to founding your own company. And there could be lessons in anything to do with sales. It could be to do with marketing. It could be to do with business. So yeah, I'd love to hear it, man.
Well, first off, I'm super excited to have this conversation. I think this is fun, and the framework of this should be interesting. For me, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in a town called Fremont in California. And it's so funny because we look at things now and what I do now in sales and persuasion and coaching. And I was a shy, awkward, only child, late bloomer. And, my mom is a banker, finance manager. My dad was a engineer, program manager. And I went to school, actually, my bachelor's degree, some people don't realize this, is in marine biology. And I spent years tagging sharks. So I was doing that, and it was tough to find work in that because it was so competitive. I didn't know what I wanted to do really in life. I thought I just didn't want to deal with people, but I liked solving problems. Ended up moving to Seattle and working at Microsoft for a couple of years doing tech support, which was interesting, but I found out that wasn't really where I wanted to be either. It was kind of a journey of self-awareness. And then in 2002, I got my first sales job where I was working in the mortgage business, so helping people buy homes and refinance. And that was good, except, I didn't really get any training. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm 27 years old and first sales job. And
sounds like nearly every sales job, really, Jason. Throw in at the deep end, right? This is the product we sell. This is the service we sell. Right, hit the phones, hit the emails, get started.
And mine was but a slightly different version, which is, the owner, basically on my first day, he said, I sent 10,000 postcards last week. Here's the phone. Here's a lead sheet. When the phone rings, ask these questions, fill this out, and then bring it to me, and then I'll take it from there. And I'm like, okay, sounds good. I have no idea what we're going to do. And so I basically learned that process that way. And I also learned some mistakes. I learned from some mistakes and things that I was doing wrong that I even teach people to today, because I still remember those lessons and failures from 2002, 2003. And so from there, I moved to helping people who were in foreclosure, went to work at a startup that was doing that same thing, helping people in the States avoid foreclosure. And that's where I got my first opportunity to really learn about selling and sales over the phone instead of in person. When I was in the mortgage business, it was all about, get in front of somebody as soon as possible, face to face, build a relationship, build rapport, and then everything is easier. Versus when I moved into a company where it was telephone sales, then it was all about how do you do all of that over the phone, which was a very unique challenge and took a lot of learning.
And what were you selling over the phone, Jason?
So we were helping people who were in foreclosure. So somebody who was potentially going to lose their house to an auction
Ah,
because
I
they weren't
see.
making their payments. And we were trying to either help them save their home or sell their home before that timeline, basically avoid the sheriff coming and kicking them out of their house. And so
Got
you'd
it.
think that would be easy because people would be in trouble. But what I learned is a lot of people, they're so scared they do nothing. And so I learned a lot about how people think, the fears they have, the fact that they just want to put their head in the sand. And so there was a lot of lessons from that, from a sales side of human behavior. In fact, I started studying addiction programs and 12-step rehab programs that help people usually
Wow.
get over drug addictions. But there's a lot of people who get into financial addictions or relationship addictions, and it's a lot of similar stuff. So that was
Yeah, I
fascinating.
mean, I'm sure there's a lot we can cover on that. I mean, relating that to any sales, any product that you might be selling, any service that everyone tuning in might be selling. I think it's often the case where you're speaking to people, they don't really want to do anything. Let's say you're selling, I don't know, CRM software. They don't really want to upgrade until it becomes an absolute pain in the ass. So let's say you get a lead come in, you've got to transfer that manually via email into the CRM system. Then you've got to update all the names. You've got to update the details like the estimated order value, the estimated time of close, the person's name, so on and so forth. So every time you call them, you've got to log that in until it gets so painful that it's taking you, let's say, an hour or 2 hours of your day. Each and every day you think, yeah, we need to upgrade our CRM now. So I guess that's kind of what you mean, is it?
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, and I teach that a lot now, and I've been helping salespeople realize that is your prospects, the people you're dealing with, they don't like change. Their number one fear is the fear of change and what could happen, right? There's a part of all of our brains, your brain, my brain, all of us still have this part where it still is in survival mode, right? It's the primal part. Some people call it the lizard brain. It still thinks it's thousands and thousands of years ago fighting for survival out of a cave or on the savannah. And it's literally thinking that everything out there is trying to kill us. And any decision we make, if we pick the wrong berry, we could get sick and die, right? So our prospects are the same way. They're afraid of change because change equals the potential for death, and so they don't want to do it. And your biggest responsibility as a salesperson is to help them feel comfortable with change, accept change, and then make that change that would benefit them. And then there's the whole buyer's remorse thing. Like after they make the decision, then their brain starts freaking out again.
Cool. So let's say we were offering something, be it software, as I've given that example, Jason. Have you got any tips to help overcome these? I don't know whether to call them objections, but I think they're just common with any potential customer or
Sure.
prospect that you speak to. No one really likes change, do they? And if you're anything like me, I've been saying for ages to my girlfriend, to my fiance, I've been running, because we're on lockdown, I've been running 2 or 3 days a week. Um, and I'm not even wearing running trainers. And it's got to the stage where it's literally hurting my ankles and hurting my knees because I'm not running in trainers. And I think now I need to buy trainers. I'm
Right.
thinking I'm that annoying prospect that it won't buy.
Yeah. Well, and in my experience, like going to either the trainers or the CRM example or anything, it's really about being somebody who's investigating and asking questions and digging as deep as possible into the prospect and what they need and want to uncover the deepest goals they have, the deepest pain they're dealing with, the whatever that is for them, and go as deep as possible, as much as they'll let you. Now, to usually do that, you have to have some level of trust before they're going to share. So you have to do some steps properly, which is what I teach people is, you've got to take them through a process to then build enough trust where they'll share that. But, if I were to try to sell you trainers or try to sell somebody CRM, and I just do what most salespeople do, which is I'm just going to give you a big monologue and I'm just going to read off everything off the brochure and tell you about the features. If you buy, it's just dumb luck because that means you were interested. It doesn't mean I did anything as a salesperson. Versus if I really dig deep and I'm like, okay, Sam, tell me about your running. Tell me about your goals. What is it that you're trying to achieve? Tell me about your pain. Okay, boom, here's what I've got, right? That will help you accomplish all of those things for you, not for me, right?
Sure. So basically, going deeper on a level, understanding why, understanding the issues, and then customizing a solution that's actually relevant based on what you've discussed.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that I see a lot of salespeople are missing is they don't know the answer to the question, which is, why does your prospect want to buy what you're selling for their reasons? What is it that it's solving for them? What is it going to do for them? How does it accomplish their goals? Not what you think or assume everybody wants. You just assume everybody wants your CRM because it's so amazing. It's like, no, no, no. Why do they want to need it? That's the key.
Yeah, no, great point. And I think it's also sales reps. I certainly was guilty in my younger days. As a web choice, as a quick example, a digital marketing company, so we're blessed to get quite a lot of inbound inquiries. Back in my younger days, I used to think that every inbound lead should be a sell. So I
Sure.
wasn't really doing a proper discovery, which brings us back to asking good questions. It was more ask a couple questions. Right, here's the quote. Why aren't you buying? And then you get ghosted. People would stop responding to emails or calls, and it's like, now I obviously know because I understand selling process and things like that. But yeah, for many people that are new to sales, I'm sure it's a common problem.
Yeah, that's the classic example, what you said, which we've all done. Everybody who started out in sales is either starts out that way or gets to a point where they think they know it all, or they don't need to go through the pitch because they just think people should want it. And yeah, it's just missing that discovery piece.
Definitely. And then you mentioned another great point, Jason, which is buyer's remorse, which is not something we've really covered in this podcast at all. So yeah, it'd be great to learn a bit more about how we could perhaps avoid that. And I'm guessing you mean if someone perhaps says yes, let's go ahead, you close the deal, you raise the invoice, or you send the purchase order, and it's been a few days, nothing's hit your company bank account, and you're wondering what's going on. You're trying to email them, and no one's coming back.
Yeah, I mean, so there's two scenarios depending on what your sales process, right? So, specifically in that example, that's 100% correct. Like you got somebody, they're excited, you think they're on board, they're ready to go, you send over the invoice, you send over the link so they can submit the payment, however that looks, and then they disappear, right? So buyer's remorse kicked in. There's also times where somebody maybe buys over the phone. It's literally, in the call, handing over the credit card information, signing up, some way. And then after the fact, there's this buyer's remorse where they want to cancel and try to get their money back, right? So there's times when they haven't paid, there's times when they have paid. And that really goes back to that fear part. I mean, there's something in their brain that after the endorphins wear off from the excitement of the conversation, they're going to get hit with this thing that says, oh my gosh, this could be a bad decision. What if this happens? What if this? Am I making the wrong choice? Then there's also the people in their life, right? You always have to keep in mind that as soon as you hang up the phone with somebody, they're going to go talk to somebody else in their life, spouse, parent, adult child, friend. Everyone has an Uncle Bob who seems to know everything about whatever you're selling, and they're going to dissuade them from buying from you. Like always happens. Everyone's
Yep.
got an Uncle Bob. And so you have to mitigate that in advance, which is what I focus on with a lot of people, is it's going to happen. Then in your conversations, set it up so that they know that when they wake up at 2 a.m. in a cold sweat thinking they shouldn't have bought what they did, you have mitigated that so they feel okay. And then you want to do some follow-ups just to make sure. But fundamentally, this goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, is if you don't know why they needed to buy for their reasons, then you won't be able to get that person back on board that hasn't paid the invoice, or the person that's freaking out because they don't know why they wanted it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because I guess there's a lot of questions you can ask, and like you say, some scenarios bring it back to our company Web Choice. The amount of times people have said or nearly agreed a deal, and then they've said, look, my cousin can do a website, let's say for example,
There you
cheaper,
go.
or they can do
There you go.
this strategy cheaper, or whatever it may be. So it's, yeah, I guess like you say, it's more blocking those, so asking the questions early. Um, so yes, we might be more expensive. The investment might be higher than your friend down the road or your cousin doing this project. Is that going to be an
And
issue?
I'll tell you, like, because I've had that before, where there's always somebody could do it cheaper, somebody has a better deal or offer, somebody thinks they can just do it themselves. And what I've always told those people, because I want them to get that out of the way, that the challenge is a lot of sales reps try to manipulate or twist their arms and get them to do it, but then there's that buyer's remorse really heavy because they know they should have gone with their cousin. And instead, I just tell people, that's great, I want you to go do that, And if it doesn't work, let me know. I'll be here. I've even told people sometimes, I'm like, hey, go do that. In my experience, I know it usually doesn't work out when somebody tries to help you with this. And my promise to you is that when you call me back in a month because it's not going well, I want to help you. And I promise I won't say I told you so.
Adding a bit of humor. And
And letting them know, right? Because their fear is that they don't want to call you back because they're embarrassed because you were
sure.
right, they were wrong, their cousin doesn't know what they're doing with their websites, and they should have gone with you, but nobody wants to admit they're wrong. Most people don't, and it's embarrassing. And so I always just promise people, I just want to help you. I don't care. There's no shame.
Love it. Love it. Okay, mate. Moving forwards. So that was the telephone role, basically helping people not get kicked out of their properties. What was next
Yeah.
for yourself, Jason?
So in that role, I became a sales leader there for the first time. So I started managing people, developing processes, and then from there, I moved to a company that was helping people with their credit card debt. So it was
Okay.
attached to a nonprofit credit counseling agency, and it was helping people get out of credit card debt and avoid bankruptcy, and people who were just way over their head. And what was interesting is, again, you'd think that'd be really easy. You're dealing with somebody who has a lot of credit card debt, but there's so much fear and worry and all these things that people are dealing with. So that was interesting. So managing teams, and then my position there evolved into business development, which is where I really started to become self-aware of what I really enjoyed most. Like, I've always loved training and coaching and leading and then building processes, but I went into a business development role helping other affiliates come on board with offices. And then so I was training them, and then I would go to their sites and train them there and coach their reps and help them with the whole process. And so that was interesting and fun because I realized, you got to take what you can do here and you've got to essentially make a franchise out of it, right? Like if you go to a McDonald's or somewhere like that, anywhere in the world, it's always the same. It feels the same. The menu's basically the same. The food is the same. And so, learning how to take that and systems that I was using, but make it so that anyone could use it.
Yeah, great. And I bet I guess there's some lessons you could share with us in terms of managing teams, teams of sales professionals and things like that could be useful for our audience.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've always found, like there's obviously the hiring part, there's the selection part. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation about, recruiting the right people and also having a culture. Do you have a mission, a vision, core values? Do you have something that identifies your company? And then, if someone's going to be a good fit or not. But the biggest thing that I've learned over the years is that generally what sales managers and sales leaders do is they try to do the carrot or the stick. They're trying to do external motivation, right? So the carrot is, hey, if you sell more deals, here's a bigger pile of money, or here's a watch, or here's a TV, or here's a trip to the Caribbean. The challenge with that is that you have to continually increase those bribes because people get desensitized, right? Like, okay, here's $1,000. Okay, that's cool. Now what are you going to do? What are you going to give me to work hard this week, right? And so then you have to keep increasing it. And then the other side is the stick, which is, threats of termination. Terminating people just leads to high turnover. And the biggest solution I found for that is to help people identify what it is they want. And the exercise I do with everybody is I have them, especially when they just start in sales, is I have them create a vision board. So create a vision board. It sounds childish. It sounds hokey. Some people are like, well, that's weird. But literally having this, board of images to put, especially if you're on a phone and it's literally staring at you, you need something to help you stay motivated. So when you've heard no 50 times or 100 times, what's going to make you pick up the phone and call one more person instead of the threats of your boss standing over you?
Great. Yeah, I've kind of recently set up a vision board, and we've had guests on that do believe in them. We've had guests that don't. Personally, I've told this story briefly before, but when I was working at a marketing company a few years ago, one of the best managers that I had, or he was the boss at the time, he sat me down probably a month or so after I started working for him. I was the lead sales guy, and he basically said, "Sam, what do you want to get out of this? Out of this sales role?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, why have you started here? Why are you working for me? I was like, right, okay, I want to make money, want to do this, want to do that. And he's like, no, what do you really want? And I was like, well, I want to move in with my girlfriend at the time, and therefore I want to be able to get a house together, so I want to put down a mortgage. And I'd like to be able to go on a few nice holidays, as you mentioned, the Caribbean, like Mexico, Jamaica, whatever it may be. He said, okay, we're going to put down a plan. We're going to make that happen. And we're going to make it happen in 6 months. I said, there's no way. There's no way we're going to do that. Anyway, we sat down probably a good few hours. We basically mapped out a daily plan, a weekly plan, and a monthly plan. We split it into clear, actionable milestones. And probably 4 or 5 months down the line, I'd hit that amount. So I'd had enough to put down the mortgage for the house and do the other things. So I was amazed because we broke it down into manageable chunks. So that was, just a quick story on kind of how I've seen that into action.
I love it. And what that tells me is that manager, that boss, that amazing coach of people, not just a manager. So a lot of times people are managing salespeople and they think they should manage and micromanage. But really, you should be a leader and a coach, which is, okay, what's your goal, Sam? Right? Whether you do a vision board or not, I always recommend it. Some people are driven by images. Sometimes it's not just, flashy things on there. Maybe it's quotes. Maybe it's like a bigger picture thing. Depends on what the purpose is for you in that moment. But identifying that, then setting goals, setting action steps, and then holding people accountable. Like, hey, you said this was your goal. Where are you at with this? Why aren't you doing it? As a coach and a leader, not a boss and a micromanager and someone that's putting somebody down. It's like, you said you wanted to buy a house, Sam. Like, where are we at with the numbers? What can you do today? Is that still important to you?
Love that. Love that. Okay, excellent. So fast forward a little bit, Jason. Was the next step setting up on your own, your consulting group, or was there something before?
There was 2 stops before, going from that. So at that period of my life, some things happened. And for several reasons, I took a break from the sales world and the real world. And I actually worked as a government contractor, as a civilian working on government contracts, and deployed overseas for a little while. So I did that for 4 years. And it was interesting because I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and it gave me a lot of time to think about stuff. I actually worked on and started the process of getting my MBA, which I completed. And I was working on some other projects. And then I came back in 2016 and worked at a company where I was helping manage and lead sales, marketing. At one point I had sales, marketing, and operations, which included customer service and processing all under me. Which was a lot, but for me, I look at the customer as the main important focus, and it's one customer that starts in marketing, then goes to sales, then goes to customer service, then goes to billing, and all those things. And a lot of companies treat them as separate. They're led separate, and it's always a battle of sales versus marketing, sales versus this, everybody's versus everybody, and instead, like, it should be all one.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of things to juggle at the same time.
Yeah,
I'm guessing.
for sure.
I'm guessing you learned a lot in terms of time management and client management and things like that.
Time management, delegation, and then when I went into consulting a year and a half ago, then it's taking those systems and processes and looking at it and being able to document things, be able to create scalable systems that people can do. Because one of the things I learned in my career, and this is what I focus on now as a consultant, right? We're talking about tips and things that I learned, is a lot of companies, especially if they're sales organizations, they think the solution and the way to win is to have superstars. And superstars are great. The challenge is it's hard to scale with superstars. Superstars can be difficult to manage and lead. They can be very challenging to deal with. They're also really expensive. And for some organizations that works well, for most organizations, it doesn't, right? Like, it's really hard to find 100 LeBron James and put them in one room together and have them all work together and then, make lots of sales. Like, that's really hard to do. Instead, what I found is more successful for companies to scale is finding, people for sales who maybe they don't have a ton of experience. They have the desire, they have some basic skills, they have the openness and willingness to learn and be coached. And then you give them systems and scripts and processes and a CRM and leads, and they will create amazing results, even if they're not superstars.
Love that. So more so searching for people that have got the motivation, that have got the right attitude, rather than maybe sales heavy hitters that might have quite a bad attitude and things like that. That could be hard work.
Yeah, because it's tough to scale that way, right? And then it's also damaging for culture. I've seen a lot of top sales reps who just are just destroy company cultures just because of their attitude and the way they think they fit in versus what a company needs. So I subscribe more to like the McDonald's model. I call it McDonaldizing your sales team, which is, McDonald's serves billions of hamburgers a day based on, entry-level employees, teenagers, low, minimum wage, people who are just getting started in the workforce, but they do it and it's consistent all over the place. So how do you build that for sales teams where you can take people who mean well and you can, help them achieve amazing stuff?
Awesome, man. So moving forward, let's talk a bit more about your business. It'd be great to learn at what stage you thought or you took the leap to start off on your own, and how you've been able to scale the business over the last kind of, is it a year or two or a little bit longer you've been doing it, Jason?
A year and a half.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so if you could tell us a bit more on kind of how you built it up and the channels that have worked for you in terms
for
of
me, I
marketing.
thought about this years ago. I wanted to do it. In fact, when I went back to school and got my MBA, that was the plan. I wanted to get my MBA, go into consulting, leverage everything I had done with sales teams and organizations, and then parlay that into helping people, but as a consultant. And then I got a job offer for a company where I was essentially internally, I was a consultant, right? Like I moved from department to department. I fixed things, I built things, we expanded, I started new offices. I did essentially as an employee everything I would have done as a consultant. And then when that ended, I decided to go into consulting. I said, okay, now's the chance. I'm going to do this. And it was interesting, but when I started, and this is the part I always like to share with people, is there's a lot of people, you see success and you think it's great and everything is going well, but like for me, the first 6 months was nothing. Like I was putting in a lot of effort, I was networking, I was working on building things, but it took 6 months for things to begin, because when I started, I didn't have a huge network. I didn't go into it planning on being a consultant. I wasn't like, okay, let me just build this this list and this network and a big database of people, which is what they always advise you to do if you're going to start, especially consulting. So I didn't, but so I just started it kind of on faith and knowing it was what I wanted to do and putting in lots of effort. I started my podcast even before I had clients. Like I was working on lots of projects, and then it all started to click. And one of the biggest things for me on the marketing side was it was all about relationships. It was all about networking. It was about talking to people. Because one of the challenges where, some people, cold calls are best, cold calls aren't the best. For me, what I have found in the conversations I've had when as a consultant, I'm helping salespeople, I'm helping sales teams improve. Cold calling and telling somebody, hey, how's your sales team doing? Are they doing bad? If they're doing bad, I can help you, right? Like, especially sales managers and or owners, their ego is going to kick in and they're not going to like the thought of that. And so what I found is relationships, networking, people who find me or I come across them or I'm introduced to them and they're like, yes, I need help. And that's been the best way for me on the marketing side.
Got it. Okay, so working relationships. So can we dive a little bit deeper into that, Jason, as in how you're acquiring these relationships? Are we talking face-to-face networking? Are we talking LinkedIn? Are we talking introduction for our existing clients? Or yeah, if you could share a bit more on that side of things.
So some face-to-face, there's going to trade shows, going to conferences, going to networking events was really good. And at least when it's allowed is still a really good way. I mean, you can do stuff on Zoom, you can do phone calls, you can do all kinds of things, but there's just something more powerful about meeting somebody face-to-face and building some kind of relationship that way, even if that's just how it starts and then you never see them again in person. I've had some business start that way where it's like, within 10 minutes, like, oh, this is great, we should do this thing. And, versus other ways. My main platform that I'm on all the time is LinkedIn. I mean, it's for business. I'm looking for business people and sales people and also producing lots of content. So I produce a lot of information out there. Like I said, I have my podcast, which is 5 days a week and is not really designed for lead generation. Some people do podcasts where it's like huge call to actions and it's really about driving that interest. For me, I do some of that, but it's also just a way to help and show what I can. Like it's just content marketing, right? Like we're talking about different styles of marketing. It's content marketing, which is here's all the stuff I know. And just imagine if this is what I know and I'm willing to share on a podcast or in my book, just imagine what I'm not sharing and what you could get if you hire me and what we could put into place, right? So I come from that approach, which is here's everything for free. Like here's all of my knowledge and then, putting it together, right? Like knowing that how to work out or knowing how to eat well is different than hiring a trainer who's going to help you do it and put the pieces together, right? Same thing for you guys, right? Knowing how to build a website, knowing how to do marketing, knowing how to do these things, that's great, right? I could watch YouTube videos on that all day. That doesn't mean I know what to do.
So true. That's a really great way of putting it as well. And I think a lot of people, well, perhaps not everyone, but some people I think are scared rather to share tips for free, be it on LinkedIn, be it on YouTube, be it on a podcast. They think that if I give all this away, then no one's going to come to me. But in fact, it's quite the opposite, really, isn't it? I think it helps to build trust, authority, and things like that.
100%. And what I've learned, and this just comes from a standpoint of abundance, which is really what drives me the most. 7 billion people on the planet, right? Like, how many clients do I need? How many clients can I service? How many customers do I need? Even with my book, how many people do I want? If my vision is helping 100,000 people become authentic persuaders, right? That's 100,000 out of 7 billion. That's nothing. Like literally, that's nothing. So there's no reason to be desperate or scared or have scarcity mind. And I've always taught reps that too. I mean, one of the biggest things I teach salespeople is if somebody's not qualified, tell them no. Like, no, you're not a good fit. I can't help you. Go do this instead. Because it's so powerful when you do say yes, then you really mean it. It's like just a different attitude shift. But what I tell people on that, about giving it away for free, I tell people all the time, if you listen to my podcast, season 1 was 110 episodes. Each week was a theme. 1 week was on scripting, 1 week's on technology, one on marketing, one's on referrals. If you take those 110 episodes and you just go through all of them and listen or read all the transcripts, that's how to build and run a sales organization. That's it.
Nice,
That's it. It's everything you know. And what I know, because I know you feel the same way, is that if somebody wants to do that and listen and take that and not hire me, then they weren't going to hire me no matter what, even if I kept all the, the secrets to myself, that they weren't that person. I want the person who goes through and goes, okay, yeah, now I want to hire you.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I don't know about yourself, Jason, but over time, I mean, I started this show with mainly the goals of learning from experts, sales, marketing, and business experts, just like yourself, sharing their views with the audience. And over time, every now and then, I do get inquiries from people that have listened to the show, and they pop in and they say, look, Sam, loved this episode on XYZ. Would love to discuss this. Don't know if you've had the same, but yeah, for anyone that's thinking of doing a podcast, it's not a quick win. It is a long-term thing. That as long as you're doing something you're passionate about talking about, then it will pay off in the long run.
Yeah. And just like anything, right? As long as you're not forcing it, I can tell the podcast where I feel like people are doing it because they were told to, and they think that's a good way to market and do lead generation. And it just doesn't feel like they're excited about it. They're not just doing it where they don't care. I'll also tell you, for me, business wise, I mean, I've had success with the guests that I've had on the show, right? So I have a guest on the show, then we're talking about it, and then we're building that relationship. And then next thing you know, either they want to hire me or they know somebody that I should talk to that's, I could help. And so that's actually been more of the lead generation side for me, is actually through the relationships of people I'm dealing with and talking to.
Completely agree. Yeah, it's a really good way to build up your network as well. And like you say, start new relationships. Okay, so we've got networking face-to-face. We've got creating a podcast. We've got LinkedIn. Any other channels, Jason, that have helped you acquire new business, perhaps offline, cold calling, cold email, or perhaps with your website, or any others that you could share with us?
The website, the blog, it's having that content out there, emailing it out to people. I've been running some, PPC type campaigns and trying to drive that, SEO. So that has helped as well. Again, I'm a big one for the inbound, for people, especially because also what I teach and train and help people with is help their sales teams with their inbound lead conversion. So okay. I try not to be a hypocrite. Like if I'm teaching everyone how to close inbound leads, then it seems weird if I'm making cold calls. So, it's mostly relationship and, just reaching out and building it that way. And then lots of content. I mean, creating ebooks, creating different funnel type things where somebody finds it and they go, okay. And then we start that conversation.
Great stuff. And just before we wrap things up, for an inbound lead, Jason, I know everyone's got their own strategy. I recently heard from Josh Braun, who was on this podcast a little while back. I think he posted on LinkedIn, one of the starting questions was when someone gets in touch with you, you ask them what motivated you to get in touch. So for example, with ourselves, it might be I saw an ad or found you on Google. My response might be, that's great. I see a whole bunch of companies on Google, but what about us specifically prompted you to get in touch with us? And then they'll start diving into why they'll probably start diving into the issues they're having. They'll probably talk for about 5 minutes. Not always, but it's a good opener. But have you got any great opening questions to ask inbound inquiries?
No, I mean, I think depending on what you're selling and where the leads are coming from, I think that's a great way to go. I've seen salespeople be successful at was, what about that letter that caught your attention? What was it that interested in you there? What is it that you're looking for help with? For me, I go more with the help with than the why, what did you like that you saw? I think it's just personal preference. It's also, this is one of those things where you have to be very careful. And I don't teach a lot of sales like lines and tactics because it's more the fundamentals, and I focus on the foundational stuff that then makes all of that easier. But you've got to be really careful, even with that line you're saying from Josh. I've heard reps say, it's like, okay, what was it about the website that you were interested in? And it's like almost instantly confrontational and dramatic, and that can really repel people. So I take more of the how can I help you today? What is it you're looking for help with? And then just like you said, just see if I can get them to just talk and ramble on until I know enough to ask more questions.
Got it. Cool, man. And just before we kind of finalize things, for anyone that's tuning in that's thinking of starting their own company, or anyone that's started their own business very recently, have you got any tips or any golden nuggets of advice that might help them out in their first few weeks, months of starting a company?
I would say if you're talking really early on, I think one of the biggest keys is just to be really self-aware. I mean, I think that's the answer for everything anyway in life, but to be really self-aware with who you are, what your strengths are, and what value you're providing. And then also be aware of your weaknesses and whatever blind spots you can, because anybody who starts a business, it's because they have an idea or, a passion for something, or, they're going after some kind of goal. And so what's driving you? So the why, what's on the vision board, because you're going to need some big reason why, because life is going to punch you in the face several times. It just does that normally. And you're going to hit roadblocks, you're going to hit walls, you're going to hit barriers, and you're going to have something that pushes you through so you don't just, fold up and quit, which obviously isn't the goal. And so you want to be self-aware enough to know, what are your strengths? Like, what are you really good at? Which part can you do really well? And then when financially reasonable and responsible, how can you get help in the other things? And I'll tell you, the number one book I recommend to anybody who's running a small business, even if they're by themselves, as a solopreneur especially, is it's called E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. It's E-Myth Revisited, and it's not the electronic myth, it's the entrepreneurial myth. And literally he describes why most small businesses fail. And I won't go into details so people can check it out. But he wrote that book in the 80s. He's written updated versions. There's all kinds of advanced modules, but E-Myth Revisited basically talks about why they fail and what you can do about it and building systems around it.
Nice, man. We'll have to check that book out and put a link in the description for the show. Excellent stuff. Yeah. Okay, Jason. Well, we like to ask everyone that comes on, if you could thank just one person, either dead or alive, for having a positive influence on yourself and your career, who would that be and why?
Man, that's a tough one. For me, I would say it was my grandmother. She's the biggest influence, I would say, because no matter what, and this is what good grandmas do, is like, she always believed in me and always pushed me to do what I want to do to be happy. And the line that she always used to say is, God don't make junk. And everyone has this thing, right? Everyone has this value and they can do something. And she, plus my parents, were very much into just go your path. And keeping in mind, again, I'm a sales consultant with a bachelor's degree in marine biology. Like, I'm a hot mess on paper. Like, I went a very windy path. And so it was that support that helped me just keep going and then really put it all together.
Awesome, man. Well, everyone, you've been tuning into Sam's Business Growth Show, where we sit down with business leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs from across the globe. We find out their story, how digital marketing has helped along the way, and exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your business and your sales. Jason, tell us a bit more about your company, how people can connect with yourself, and the best way to get in touch.
So Cutter Consulting Group is the company. And recently what I've done is, just to keep it simple, because I have so many things out there for people to check out, is if they go to jasoncutter.com, That's JASONCUTTER. I basically built that as a hub. So if you go to jasoncutter.com, you can go to the consulting website. You can find my authentic persuasion website and ebook. I have a free ebook there. The podcast links. Also for anybody who's in sales leadership, want to get on a phone call, there's a link on there to schedule time. I'm a sales nerd and a business nerd, so I love talking to anyone about sales, seeing if there's ways I can help them. So that's a good hub to find all of the various things I got going on.
Brilliant, man. Jason, thanks so much for coming on.
Sam, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Are you tired of constantly hunting for new customers? You could be missing out on regular inbound opportunities, all because your website isn't on the first page of Google. Perhaps you're already spending lots of money on advertising, but your website is failing to convert all of your hard-earned visitors into a consistent flow of new customers. If you'd like to learn more about our unusual approach that brings idle clients straight to you, connect with Sam Dunning on LinkedIn or book a free 20-minute consultation via webchoiceuk.com. That's webchoiceuk.com. Subscribe today for more digital marketing, sales, and business growth tips from the experts.